All right. All right. Good evening. Welcome again to our New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for this Thursday, September 2nd. We are in the last month of the baseball season, and hopefully, the way it's looking, we will see October. So it's a great thing.
Speak for yourself.
Sorry. Tonight we have Charles Fracchia, who's going to be talking. I'll introduce him a little later. He loves the fact that I could say his name correctly. So I just want to inform you guys, last week we had a nice turnout. Peter Laskowicz hosted a tour of the Polo Ground areas. It was very, very hot. Perry was there. Craig was there. A lot of people. Dave Lippman was there. I don't know anybody. I think that was it from who's over here right now. It was really, really nice. Peter did a great job. And then I met up with a couple of people at the game. Lincoln Mitchell, who is here today, did a little nice story for us. Thank you, Lincoln, in the San Francisco Examiner. And Lincoln is also working on yet another book on the Giants. And I sent that around to anybody who has made Candlestick Park their home, who could help out, Lincoln with his upcoming book. Lincoln has done both live and Zoom with us, and I'm hopeful that once his book is done, whenever that might be, he will be a guest again on this. So thank you again, Lincoln. The next couple of weeks, we have Linda Tossetti next week, who is Babe Ruth's blood granddaughter. She's going to talk about the great Bambino. She'll talk a lot about his time playing at the Polo Grounds and John McGraw. Next, we have Mike Hauser, who will talk about his great uncle, George Burns, who John McGraw said was the best player on the New York Giants, who was not a pitcher. And then finishing up the month, we have incredible writer Josh Prager, who'll be talking about the Echoing Green, the 70th anniversary of Bobby Thompson's Shot Heard Round the World. And if you haven't read that book, it is. Terry, you want to comment on that book?
Yes, listen to it on audio if you can. Josh narrates it himself, and it's just so beautifully done. And, everybody here who's read it or heard it or knows Josh knows just how incredibly poetic and stirring his book is, and his recollections and the interviews that he got with Branca and so many of the major figures in that. And it's just lovely, and he's just a wonderful person. I can't say enough good things about him.
The only thing we'll have to do is hold Harvey Weinberg back that day. Right, Harv?
I promise to be on my best behavior.
You always are on your best behavior. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce Charles Fracchia. Charles was the star of a video called The Adventures of a Superfan. I was lucky enough to see the video this past week. It is fun. It is entertaining. Charles, I really can't say much more than, I don't know how you pull this off, because everybody here thinks they are the ultimate super fan. And if I ask Lincoln, he is. Rich would say he is. Steve would say Norm. Everybody would say they are. But this video is really a piece of work.
Lincoln would say I am.
I tell people that compared to Charles, I just have a passing interest in the Giants. So I'm not challenging Charles for that title.
But
John Leonidakis would say that I, it's John's movie, so he would say that yes, I am a super fan.
So. Yeah, John did the movie. John also spoke at one of our live meetings with Arnold Haino, because he did a DVD on him, and it was fabulous. And John, how old was Arnold then? Maybe 90?
Back then he was 95. He's 99 now. He's still with us.
Unbelievable. And he was sharp that night and knew exactly what was going on and was able to answer every question. But without further ado, Charles, the floor is yours. Please explain Adventures of the Superfan, what it's all about. And then I guess when you're done talking and giving us some examples of what you did, we'll have a nice Q&A unless you want questions during the talk. So New York Giants Preservation Society welcomes Charles Fracchia. Charles, the floor is yours.
Well, this whole thing started because you got to give credit where credit is due. I give credit to Lincoln Mitchell, who took somebody who knew absolutely nothing about baseball and would drag him to Candlestick Park, which is probably as miserable a park as that place was. I loved growing up there. It was fun. It was just, and then when the Yankees would come to town, we'd have to go to Oakland to go see the Yankees and the A's. So that was always entertaining. And the year that I spent the summer, my father was dating Lincoln's mother, which is like, it's an only in San Francisco kind of story. And my father was off working he was writing a book and he was traveling. At that point, I was living with my father as opposed to my mother and my three sisters. And my father said, okay, you're going to live with Susan and her sons, Jonathan and Lincoln. Sadly, Jonathan has passed. And I spent the summer and I would like get up and go to school and I'd come back and, and then on the weekends we go play catch or go to the park and throw the football around, or we would go to the ball game. And so it was 1978 and 78, the Giants had probably one of their best years since 71. And I thought they were good every year. I was wrong on that count. But it was so much fun. And it was like, I felt like, as I was raised Catholic, it was, this is like church. This is like fun. And Sundays, you get two for the price of one. You get at least 9 inning double headers. And it was just so much fun. And the 78 team, they had, McCovey, who was kind of a bridge to the great Giants teams of the past, although he did not have a great year, but he did his 500th home run. They had Mike Ivey coming off the bench to pinch hit grand slams. They had Vida Blue and Bob Nepper and, John the Count Montefiusco. And it was so much fun. And it kind of like, I've always felt like the game kind of like it pulled me in and it's never let go. And at that point in time, I switched from 7th grade, I went to public school in the city, to 8th grade, I went to private school, which was near downtown. I went to Notre Dame des Vitois. And so on my way after school, I would walk down Grant Avenue. And there at 170 Grant Avenue was a Giants dugout store. And one day they had the 1979 Giants media guide up for sale. And it was marked down to 95 cents. And I thought, that's a great deal, and I got 95, I got $1 and whatever. And I was like, so I bought the media guide, which I had to kind of find to pull out of mothballs. And I was like, didn't think anything of it. I'm like, great, this is, the 78 team and this is fun. And I remember it was a winter of like 1980, and I'm over at John Lincoln's house and we're hanging out that Sunday and we're reading the paper and reading the comics and reading the sports. And in the sports section, sure enough, they're having some card show. And as a signing guest, it's Willie McCovey, who had just retired that year. I had no idea what ball players did after their careers are done, or, I just didn't know. And he was signing for $5 in 1980, which at that point was a lot. I had no idea the autograph kind of industry for sports and everything was going to explode. So Willie McCovey became my first autograph. I went into high school. I didn't really do much about it. I went into college. I didn't do much about it. And then kind of after college, I started kind of, it's kind of interesting because you have the change you have the pre-internet era, and then you have the post-internet era. So I was working on this thing during the pre-internet era, and I would look up, I'd look up in Sports Collectors Digest to see who was signing and send it off to get an autograph, or I'd look to see, in Baseball America, who was coaching, what Giants player or former player was coaching for what team. And, so I ended up like, I would either send it off, or I ended up going to Fresno and trying to think Half Moon Bay, and, to get these guys who had become coaches or managers with other teams. Or I'm trying to think where, I went to go see Daryl Evans up in, not Lodi, but I'm trying to remember where. But anyway, and it was just, it kind of an infrequent kind of thing. And I'd look and see who was signing autographs, and, and then when the internet came, it made it a whole lot easier, because then I could like call these guys and say, hey, can I mail this to you? Can you send it back? And most of the time the guys were great. Skip James, who had a very brief, I'd say, cup of coffee. I spoke to his wife. She said, yeah, send it. I waited 3 weeks. I didn't get it back. I called. She hung up on me twice. Or no, first time I left a message. Second time she hung up on me. And so I am a big believer in letter writing and take great pride in my handwriting. And I wrote a letter to the local police department in Kansas, and got a call back from their PR person, who was a very nice woman, and said, she goes, what do you think this is worth? And I had, I was down to like needing like the last 5 autographs. I had never thought to ask myself that question. And I was like, and she goes, well, is it worth over 1,000? I said, yeah, I think so. And she goes, oh, great. If he doesn't return it, we'll charge him with a felony. I was like, oh, okay. I did not expect that. And she goes, if you don't get it back, within a week or so, let me know. And sure enough, within the week I had it back, and I'm like, damn, I expected him to put some expletive with the autograph and did not get that. But, I lassoed a couple buddies into driving up to Oregon, because I had one guy who was like, he was a minor league second baseman, and I had called him, written him, and emailed him. I always wanted to, once the internet happened, I always wanted to touch base to make sure that it was okay that I send it before sending it. And I got no response on all 3. He didn't return my call. He didn't reply to my letter. He didn't, and I think I included a return envelope, and he didn't reply to my email address. And he was a school teacher up in Oregon. And I talked to a couple buddies up. I said, hey, I want to rent a car and go up to Oregon and get this guy's autograph. And they're like, what's the name of the guy? Because I think they expected it to be some star. And I'm like, well, his name's Mike Rex. And they're like, well, we've never heard of him. I said, well, do you guys want to come with me on the road trip? And they said, yeah. So we drove all the way up to Oregon. I think it was like 20 hours, like round trip. And then including like getting off on the wrong highway entrance and, we got to a grocery store, and, I park, and right next to us is like a truck, and the big, huge dog comes right to the other truck's window and starts barking at me. I'm like, scared the hell out of me. My buddies went in and got directions. I'm like, I'm not getting out of my car on this side. And, so then we go back to, and I find a hospital, and I can't find the freeway to get to the town that I'm looking for. And I see a security guard, and I kind of wave him down, and he goes, follow me. And he's driving like a golf cart, and we're like following him, and he kind of like points towards the road, the freeway entrance, and we get back on the freeway and make it there. And it was just exhausting because it was a rental car. I drove the whole thing myself. And it was really kind of funny because there's a sign that says, you are now leaving California. And then, a couple paces down, it says you are now entering Oregon. Well, it's really kind of funny because they don't have that on the reverse way back. So, which I thought was kind of odd. And I go and, and we get there, and I get up early the next morning. I ask my buddies, you guys want to come with me to go get his autograph? They're like, no. I'm like, okay, well, I got him to Oregon. So I drive off to the school. I go into the front room, and I'm like, and I start to explain to the secretary. She puts her hand up. She doesn't want to hear. She doesn't care, but she does call him to the front room. He signs my media guide, and I said, yeah, I drove up from San Francisco. He goes, you drove all the way up here for this? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, okay, thank you. And that was it. And I drove back to the hotel to pick up my buddies. I stopped off at like a Walgreens because, you know, I figured, you know, well, I got to get postcards, because we should at least send postcards while we're here. And so we sent them back. I think we beat the postcards back on the way back. And it was just, you know, it's like, you know, my friends are like, this doesn't phase them or pulse them. It's like, it's Charles. They expect it. The last autograph I got, as I said, started in 1980. The last one I got was 2015. Hector Haiti Cruz, who Gary and I talked about, because Hector's first appearance with the Giants, he had a pinch hit home run. I think it tied up the game against the Mets in the bottom of the ninth.
Channel 9.
Yep. So he also wore jersey number 9 too. I'm actually still in touch with Hector. And I was going to Chicago because I have a buddy of mine who does sports card shows, and I was kind of working for him. And I said to him, you know, I told him, hey, at some point I might need to go. And and I emailed Hector, and I didn't email him. I didn't have his email address, but I wrote him a very nice letter. I thank God that I have really nice handwriting every day. Although I feel like with computers, it's kind of wasted, but that's okay. So I wrote him a very nice letter. I included a return envelope. He signed the letter that he sent back to me. He did include his email address. You know, and he, you know, so I emailed him about 2 weeks before I was to go. I didn't hear back from him. And then a week before I was going to go, and I didn't hear back from him. And I'm like, well, I have an address for him. Hopefully it's the right address. So I get to Chicago, you know, I go in I'm in the business center. While I'm in Chicago, I was in Chicago for a week. My phone died. So I had like no cell phone. And I'm like, thank God they had a business center at the hotel. So I'm there and I'm looking up, you know, how to get to the address I had. So I go, you know, I drag a buddy, we go catch, you know, what is it? It's not the L, it's something. Whatever the subway is in Chicago. We get off, we catch a bus, we get off at the bus stop. I have no idea how safe or not safe these neighborhoods are, but I go, and it's like, it's in a kind of a sort of a 2 like apartment building. And I knock on the door, and there's no answer. And I go around to the back, and there's no one there. And I'm like, you know, okay, all right. And I see a couple of like people across the street. And so I go talk to them. And they said, oh yeah, that's his rental property. He doesn't live there. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, good to know. Thank you so much. And I grab my buddy, we go back, we catch the bus, we catch the subway back. You know, I'm like, you know, well, you know, I guess the only choice I have now is to email him that I'm here in Chicago. So I email him. And I'm like, you know, and I get, you know, since I didn't have a cell phone, I said, well, I'll give him the phone number for the hotel and the room number, you know? And like the next day, I'm sitting there, I'm dozing off, we're watching Oprah, you know, the show's a day or so away, and he calls. And it's like, and I knew right when he called, I said, it's him. And I'm like, you know, kind of like, I'm not jumping up and down, but I'm like, you know, very close to like having a heart attack in a good way. And so I pick up the phone, he goes, this is Hector Cruz. And I said, it's so nice to hear from you. This is Charles. You know, he goes, you know, let me give you my address. And I started to ask him, well, how do I get there? And I thought, that's the wrong question to ask. I said, I will be there. And he goes, well, can you come tomorrow morning? And I said, well, can I come now? It's mid-afternoon. You know, I don't know how long it's going to take, but I'm like, you know, he's there, I'm there, and I'm there. And so he gives me the address. I go back to the business center. Business center saw a lot of me that day, or that trip. And so I put in his address. I'm like, okay, it's like 2 like streetcars and a 50-minute bus ride. So I take the 2 streetcars, I get off, I catch the bus. I'm like, I have no clue where I am in Chicago. I get off, there's a big factory on the left-hand side. I'm like, you know, and I go get to the first street. There's no street sign. There's nothing up there. So I figured, okay, this might be the street. And I walk up and I ring the door. I find the house number, ring the bell. No answer. Little yappy dog comes to the window, starts barking at me. I'm like, geez, all right. You know, I see a guy sitting in his car. He's talking to some woman. I said, hey, this street, is this the right street? He goes, oh, next block over. And I was like, okay, all right. So I go and, you know, I walk down the next block. I walk up. street number. He goes, "My name's Haiti Cruz." I said, "It's so nice to meet you." I was amazed that I really did not either burst into tears or burst into flames. I was just so happy and elated to get this thing done. And he goes, "Come in," and I had gone to photo day in 1978. So I had a 110 Instamatic camera, which I took about 5 or 6 pictures of the different players, and Haiti was one of them. And I gave him an extra copy. He signed the photo that I had, and he signed the media guide. And I don't think between the time I left his house to the time I got to the bus stop that my feet actually touched the ground. They might have, but I think it was sort of, I was like, I can't believe it's done. 35 years. Who knew? I'm still collecting autographs. I had a friend of mine. She goes, "Yeah, you're gonna spend like another 35 years doing another project?" I said, "Oh God, no." I said, "I will do shorter term projects, but I'm not spending another 35 years doing this. I can't." But I have fun with it. And, part of it is I had a background working in bank fraud. So I was good at like tracking down identity thieves and identity theft victims. And so that was kind of a job skill that really served me well in terms of trying to find these people.
Charles,
And
I got a question for you.
Yes.
Two things. I was fortunate enough to see the entire video.
Yes.
Could you, before you tell us how John got involved with this and how they decided to make the film,
Mm-hmm.
two quick questions. In the media guide, how many players and whatever did you wind up having signed? And I actually really enjoyed the Randy Moffat story. If you could,
I could tell that story. Yeah. Okay. So I think, luckily for me with this project, this is the 40-man roster. So it's the 40 players, plus I included guys who were on the 78 team. If you were on the 79 team, I was a little less it was primarily the 78 team. So I also got Charlie Williams, who was famously traded for Willie Mays, even though he was not in the media guide, but he was on the 78 team. I'm trying to think. The only one I think who I missed was Lim McLaughlin, who had died very young in like 1983, and I wasn't doing anything with it. And it was tragically like in a house fire. So as far as the Randy Moffat story is really funny, I think. Basically, I had gone to spring training. I think it was 2009. I had gotten laid off from work, and the bank that I worked for had closed, and I was like, well, I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna go down for like a long weekend. I'll go down to spring training. I need to get Randy Moffat's autograph. I looked at where Randy Moffat lived in for spring training. It was about an hour drive or so, maybe an hour and 15, 20 minutes outside of, Scottsdale. He lived up in Prescott, and I'd never been to Prescott. So I, took the rental car. I'm going for a ride, so I went all the way up to Prescott, and I got there. It was 10 minutes to 9. And I did not want to knock on his door before 9 o'clock because I just felt like I should wait, and it's rude to do that. And so I'm sitting there in the car, and I'm across the street, and his neighbor comes out in a wheelchair, and he goes, "Well, what are you doing here? What do you want?" It's like third degree. I'm glad the cops, he didn't just kind of go inside and call the cops and have the cops all show up, And so I'm like, well, I want to go see Randy Moffat. I want to get his autograph. And, and the guy goes, "Hold on." And he calls him on the cell phone. "Hey, Randy, there's this guy out here, wants your autograph. What do I tell him?" And Randy said, "Take a hike," and that's what he relayed back to me. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I went to the gas station. I'm thinking, do I go back or do I take a hike? And I was like, nah, I'm going to go, I'm going to go back. I got a spring training game I want to go to. I'm like, kind of so close and yet so far. And, so like a year and a half, 2 years later, I hear Randy's going to be, they're doing an alumni thing. He's going to be there for the Giants. So I'm like, and I find out like, it's like, I think I found out on a Thursday that, I think it was a Friday. And so I hear he's going to be there. I'm standing on the streetcar going out to now Oracle Park, and I hear two buddies talking with each other. And the guy's reading his list of who's going to be at the alumni event. And Randy Moffat was on the list. And I flipped around and I was like, Randy Moffat's coming, Randy Moffat's coming. And the guy's like, yeah, Randy Moffat's coming. It was no big deal. He must have thought I was like just a lunatic. And I'm like, who's gonna Randy Moffat? And so, I got up, I don't think I slept that night, and got up really early. And I was like, I went to the BART station. The BART station was still closed. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm going home to do something. I don't know what. And so I, go home, a couple hours later, I'm back to BART, and I take BART in the city, and I go down to the ballpark, and, I got coffee, and I'm like, was wired anyway. And, I see this guy sitting there with like his caretaker, and they're waiting on a wheelchair, and I'm chatting, and, I was friendly, and, I didn't know who he was. And I said, my name's Charles, nice to meet you. And he goes, my name's Randy. And sometimes the light bulb just does not go on for me at times. And it didn't occur to me. And I'm like, and we're chatting, and, I played a little, and I was like, oh, cool. And I said, yeah, I'm waiting for Randy Moffat. And the guy goes, I'm Randy Moffat. And I was like, oh, could you, I'm so excited to meet you. Could you please sign my media guide? So he signs the media guide. The wheelchair comes. I said, thank you so much. I loved watching him play. And off he went. And what was it, like pre-COVID? I think it was 2019. And I see that his sister is Billie Jean King, who's a huge, icon. And I was like, and she's speaking at USF. I said, I got to go, And so I went to USF to go see her speak. And then at the end of the thing, she was like hitting signed tennis balls into the crowd and whatever. So I come up and I'm like, I got a baseball. And she says she signs the baseball. So I signed baseball from Billie Jean King too. So that's my story about Randy Moffat. He,
And how'd this movie come about?
The movie came about because I did a presentation for Sabre. One of my sort of quips was that when you think that your job skills won't help you with your hobby, here's an example where it did. And John Leonidakis was there, and I knew John. I'd actually seen his movies in San Francisco, and he's an alumni of St. Ignatius. And I remember going out there to see, I can't remember which one. I think it might have been his Earthquake movie. And we're chatting after the movie and everything. And and I never mentioned this project to him. And then I did the presentation, and John's like, oh, you've got to be in my baseball series. I want to interview you. This is a really good story. And I'm like, okay, so we do the first, interview. And I think it was like 3 or 4 hours. It was really long. And, and then I kind of had forgotten about it. I don't know how long it takes to kind of work on a movie and put it together. And John did a brilliant, beautiful job. And then he called me up once. He goes, I'm in the city. I think he was visiting his father and staying with his brother. And he goes, can we get together, and can I take some pictures of you down by the ballpark? And I said, yeah. I said, I got a doctor's appointment at UCSF. He goes, oh, that's so perfect. He goes, I'm staying at my brother's. My brother's right up on Parnassus and Stanton, and I can meet you. I'll come by and pick you up. And I said, okay, I'll be right on the corner there. He comes by, picks me up. We drive out to the ballpark, and he shoots all sorts of film or video of me, at the McCovey statue and in the Giants dugout store, and, looking at all the plaques on the Wall of Fame, and then John at that point kind of did a beautiful job of just putting the whole thing together.
And is the video still available? And give the exact title of the film.
It's The Adventures of Superfan. It was on Amazon Prime. Unfortunately, Jeff Bezos took it down. He doesn't like us. I don't know why. Along with all of John's other movies. And they're all wonderful movies, but they are on Vimeo. Or you can actually I'm going to hype John for this. I don't know where he's not there, but I'm going to hype John for this. You can also sign up to be a kind of, you can go to Patreon and you can be a Patreon sponsor of John and his wonderful movies, and you'll get to see the movies. And then I think one Saturday a month he does kind of a review of the movie and does a kind of guest thing with I think the last one was a week or so ago on catchers, and he had 2 catchers on there as well.
Wonderful. Why don't we
So-
open up the floor? Charles, you okay with that?
I'm okay with that. The only other thing I was going to say, one other thing is, I am friends with Murph and Mac in the Morning in San Francisco, and they introduced me to Dan Brown, who is a sports writer for The Athletic. And so Dan's like, "Oh, I want to interview you because I want to, tell this story." And so around the time that John's movie came out, Dan Brown's article came out, which was like, I think they complement each other well. So, but it's in The Athletic. Unfortunately, it's a pay thing for, but the articles are really good, and Dan Brown did an excellent job with that.
All right, opening up the floor.
So-
Anybody have a question? Lincoln, go ahead.
So I when that article in The Athletic came out, I was overseas on a work project, and I get an email from Pat Gallagher, the longtime publicist for the Giants. Do you know this guy? This is a great story. So yeah.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, I know the guy. Kind of a 2-part question, Charles. How did you end up getting Ed Halicki's autograph? That's the first part. And then the second one is, we've talked about this offline a lot, but this project took up most of your life to this. I mean, you're not, it was a 35-year quest. You're not 70 years old. Not close.
No.
So I'm curious how this fit into the broader story of a life that begins with a boy who's just, discovering and developing his passion that will last his whole life for baseball and the Giants, and takes you, well into middle age. A lot happens, a lot of water under the bridge. How does that all relate? But those are the 2 questions.
Okay, the first one was Ed Halicki. Oh God, I have to tell this story. So at one point, and Lincoln, I think, knows the story, which is why he's asking it. That's why he's giggling. I, at one point in my life, got married. I think everybody in their life, you should make mistakes because that way you learn from them. My mistake was getting married. Luckily, she's in Florida. Luckily, we don't have kids. Luckily, I almost never hear from her. And we went on our honeymoon. We went to Reno and South Lake Tahoe. We went to, we're having a Shakespeare festival on South Lake Tahoe, which is a really beautiful place to go see it. And I knew Ed Halicki lived in Reno. And I've come to find out later on, I found out that he had a furniture store. So, which I didn't know then, which I wish I had. But he lives kind of like off the beaten track, kind of paddle wheel lane, which I couldn't even find it on the map. We were at the car rental place, and I'm looking like all over the map for paddle wheel lane. And I can't find it. And, somebody said, well, I think it's over here. And, we drove over there. We couldn't find it. Finally, we gave up. And, my ex-wife goes, "You done with this for now?" And I'm like, "Yeah." We're done, And, so we go on and we go to the Shakespeare Festival. And a few years later, I had a nice, correspondence with Peter McGowan. I would write him, just kind of musings of a fan kind of thing. And he would always, always, always write me back. And I love that. And, I, at one point mentioned, I think in a letter, I said, I really wish that you would do, a night to honor the 1978 Giants. And, I think I heard back from him, but he didn't say that he was going to do it. He didn't say that he wasn't. And then I hear, a few weeks, like a month later, oh, the Giants doing a night to honor the 78 Giants. And I'm like, oh, that is so cool. I'm like, that is so cool. And I called the PR department and I said, I just want to find out, is Ed Halicki going to be there? And I said, yeah, Ed Halicki will be there. And I said, okay. I said, I've got a media guide from 1979. I would like to get it signed. And they said, well, yeah, drop it by, give your seat location, and you won't get to meet him, but we'll have him sign it for you and bring it to you. And I was like, oh, that is so cool. And so, before the game, I'd go by the little office thing, which is right next to the dugout store. And I'm like, I think they buzzed you in or something. And I said, well, here's this. And then I had a sticky note with my seat and a sticky note for the page that Ed should sign. And I, go up to my seat. I'm like, and I'm waiting. And I was there with a couple of friends. I think John Mashino joined me for that game. I'm not sure. And we're sitting there and I'm like, I'm like glued to my seat. I'm not leaving my seat. I'm waiting for the media guy. And I see this young kind of kid intern come up the stairs and he's kind of looking and I'm like, I put my arm up and he like, okay. And he brings me the media guide and I open it up and I'm like, there it is, Ed Halicki, And one of my buddies just said, Charles, you look like a cat that just swallowed the canary. I said, oh yeah. But it was like, I kind of felt like, and then I was like, when I was in the process of getting divorced and discovered I had a whole lot more free time, I kind of like, it kind of like took on, in a sense, a life of its own. And then it's like, kind of like, it's like, I remember like as a kid, they used to have the cartoons with, the boulder kind of rolling down the hill and picking up snow and everything in speed. And that's kind of how I felt for like the last, 5 autographs or 7 autographs or, and as far as, I don't know, it was just, this truly was kind of, it was a labor of love. It was a labor of persistence. If you ever want to find out how persistent you are, don't do this project, but do an autograph quest. I did the Buffalo Heads. I found, I was going through stuff. Buffalo Heads were like this group of Red Sox players from the mid 70s and just really kind of weird and eclectic people. And I discovered I had a Fergie Jenkins signed baseball. So I sent it all around the country and got all of the Buffalo Heads on the baseball. So it's like, these projects they're fun, they're interesting, they're different, There are other people doing, I don't think they're doing similar projects, but close to it,
Anybody with a question? Daniel, go ahead.
Hey, Charles. I actually live about 5 or 6 blocks away from where Charles lives in San Francisco. And when I first met him, he told me about the Media Guide project. And I still remember the first time I met him, and he actually showed me the Media Guide, like the Holy Grail. And I can attest that all the autographs really are in there. But what you can't really get from the Zoom picture is it has been through the war. I mean, all the pages are there, but it has definitely been through a lot. And to me, one of the most fascinating things about this story is I'm just thinking of me trying to do it. If I take the media guide with me and I give it to someone and they autograph it, that's all good. But this whole thing of sending it in the mail and you don't know if it's going to come back, and you told about the Skip James story. I mean, yes, you're not sending thousands of dollars in the mail, but still, it's something you put your heart and soul into. And I wonder if you could just talk about there had to be some uncertainty. There had to be some anxiety. There must have been like, I don't care if you don't sign it, just give it back to me.
There was always that, at one point I sent it to Johnny LeMaster. I am wearing my black Johnny LeMaster jersey today. Lincoln will tell you I was probably the only person at the ballpark who would not boo Johnny LeMaster. I always felt like he gave his best effort. It's, the 2 Giants who I really don't like are Armando Benitez and AJ Pierzynski. I can't stand him. Aubrey Huff is on that list too now. And I'm just like, but I sent it to him and he was, and I waited and I called him up and I called him at that point. He was coaching college baseball in Kentucky. And I got connected to his office and he picked up. And at that point I was working for the bank and I was like calling from work and I probably shouldn't have been, and nobody ever said anything. And I ended up like having a 5 or 10 minute conversation with him. And I said, I sent to your PO box and, do you want me to do a post office trace? He goes, no. I said, did you like playing? And he goes, I love playing. I had a ball playing. It was fun. And I was like, I like that kind of enthusiasm. Yes, I recognize he was not a very good player. I'm not that much of an idiot. close, but not quite. And so I remember going to the Giants home opener in 2000, the new ballpark. I went with Lincoln and his brother Jonathan, and that's a whole other story altogether. And we we go to the ball game, great game, other than the Dodgers winning, and 3 home runs by their shortstop who probably swung a toothpick. And I go home, and I was at that point, I think, engaged or married, and I think maybe married, in El Cerrito. And I go to the mailbox, and there is the media guide back from Johnny LeMaster. I had a couple times where, if you didn't believe in faith, fate, or a higher being, the other story is that I sent it off to, God, I can't remember his name. It wasn't Rich Murray, it was somebody, and hang on. Tell you who it is. Send it off to Art Gardner, who was in Mississippi. And I sent it to him, and I had seen, okay, Hector Cruz was going to do an autograph signing. If I get it back early enough from Art Gardner, I can send it off. And I sent it to him, and Art Gardner held on to it for like 9 months. I would call him every month. I wasn't trying to harass him. I wasn't trying to bother him. I just wanted him to sign it and send it back. And, he goes, yeah, I got it. I'll sign it. And, I'm busy and whatever. I'm like, okay, all right. And I'm like, and once a month I would just call him. He goes, I know. I'll get it back to you. Don't worry about it. Get it back to you. And as I said, he had it for about 9 months. And, I wasn't able to get Hector's autograph at the card show. And I was like, okay, all right. And I go to, in 2010, they win the World Series, and I go to the parade, and it's, that's an experience like heaven on earth. And, so I go to the parade, and I'm like, I was exhausted and tired, and, and I get home, and there in the mailbox is the media guide signed by Art Gardner. So it's like on the day of the Giants World Series parade. So I got one where the new ballpark opens, and I got one where, the Giants win the World Series and they have a parade.
Any other
bizarre.
Charles, Tom O'Donnell
Yes.
here. As a retired letter carrier, worked for the post office for 45 years. I'm really interested in your mailing of it. Did you mail it regular mail or certified or registered, or just took your chances? Because that bodes well for the post office. It looks like we did a pretty good job.
Oh, you guys did an absolutely excellent job. I would mail it like priority mail with a priority mail envelope back. The only time I was really concerned was actually when I sent it off to Art Gardner, because in the interim, in the 9 months that I'm waiting, the postage went up. And I'm thinking, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if they're going to send it, I don't know what's going to happen. And, 9 months later, it came back. I do not blame the post office for that. So that was on Art.
Thank you.
So, but I love the post office.
Thanks, Charles.
You're welcome.
Fred, go ahead, Fred.
Hey, Charles, thank you for sharing. Very interesting. You mentioned Bob Knepper in the beginning. Was there a story getting Bob Knepper's autograph?
The story, oh man, that's a story of persistence. So I was looking through, I think I was looking on the internet, and there was kind of a celebrity charity golf tournament for the Boys and Girls Clubs of the, who was it? I think it's of the countryside or something. It's in Half Moon Bay.
Okay.
And I had just missed it. And I had looked through kind of the list of who is, who the celebrities are, and, and but I just missed it. So I was like, I called them up and I said, do you do this every year? And they said, oh yeah, we do this every year. So I had this kind of, on my calendar for the next year. And I'm like, so I'm waiting and waiting and waiting, and I'm looking to see, who's coming to, be there. And Bob Nepper was on the list again. And so I was like, and I don't have a car. I can drive, but I don't have a car.
There you go, Lucy.
And so I talked to my high school buddy, Nick, and I said, hey, Nick is, very big on some of these stories. I said, hey, Nick, do you want to go to a barbecue thing in Half Moon Bay? And he goes, okay, what's the deal? And I said, well, I need to get Bob Nepper's autograph. So he goes, okay, yeah. He goes, are you paying for it? I said, absolutely, And so we, drive up to Half Moon Bay. It's really nice there. And I'm there and I'm like having dinner, and I'm sitting there talking to Nick, and I'm sitting there talking to a couple other people, and in walks Bob Nepper. And I recognized him from, when I was a kid. And one of the women who I was talking to was like, she goes, you look like, you saw kind of a ghost or something. And I'm like, yeah, that's Bob Nepper. And she goes, who? I said, he pitched for the Giants. He did? I was like, yeah. She did not have an interest in that. I don't know what her interest in being there was, but I was like, so I waited and whatever, and I didn't want to interrupt him like right away. And I was like, patience is, a virtue. And so I waited for a little bit and then went up to him and I said, Mr. Nepper, it's nice to meet you. Could you please sign my media guide? And, he signed the media guide. He won 17 games. He had a really kind of odd career because every other year he would do well. And then in the interim years, he would do not well.
Did he have a nickname of the Moon Man?
No, that was Greg Minton.
Oh, that was Minton. Okay.
Greg Minton, I got him when he was actually the pitching coach for the Vancouver Canadians, which were a Angels minor league team, and they were playing Fresno. And I called up Nick and I said, Nick, you want to go to Fresno? He goes, not particularly. I said, you want to go do a little road trip? He goes, okay, all right, we'll go. What are we doing? I said, well, we're going there for a weekend. I'll pay the hotel. I need to get Greg Mitten's autograph. He's a pitching coach for Vancouver. Vancouver's playing Fresno. And he goes, okay. And, not familiar with the Central Valley. We changed. The hotel was like bordering on the freeway. And Nick, God bless him. He's a good friend of mine since high school. Nick needs his sleep. So we changed rooms 3 times trying to get a quiet room. We go out to the ballpark. I'm like, I got the media guide. I'm like, excited. And I yell over, hey, Mr. Minton. He goes, call me Moon Man. I said, could you sign my media guide, please? And he comes over, signs it. He was great. Nick also, we also went up to Chico because Darrell Evans was managing an independent league team. He was managing for Long Beach, and we went up they were playing Chico. So I called up Nick again. Nick, I don't think is going to any more of these things because I think I couldn't convince him and his wife that, it's important. So we drove up to Chico and, we're waiting outside and, Darrell Evans came out still dressed in his baseball uniform for Long Beach and signed it and got a couple pictures with him. And he was very nice. So,
Thank you.
But this story is, aside from persistence, it's also the story of the automobile and, having good friends who will humor you, I think, in some respects.
Anybody else with a question?
Yes, Perry.
Darrell Evans was coaching the Aberdeen Arsenal in the Atlantic League when I was umpiring there. I think 98, early in its existence. He was a bit pricklier with me, I guess, than he was with you. Perhaps it was because we saw each other in what I supposed was an adversarial position, although I never think of umpires as adversaries when I'm out there. But I have to say that I see him down at the Tigers fantasy camp in January now, almost every
Mhm.
year. And he's much sweeter to me now that you were not in the same league. So,
As you get older, you mellow too.
yes, yeah, I guess I have too. So I don't think I ever tossed him, but I might have come close. So
Hey, Charles, whenever I see Wilmer Flores now, I think of Darrell Evans.
and by the way,
Number 41.
Charles,
Oh, okay.
I love your quixotic quest to do this. I'm not going to call it oddball, but it's
No, I
definitely
think that's a good description.
well.
Either one, but I like that, you know.
Well, I'm not a
quixotic.
collector of any sort, but I do have one piece. If you can see it,
Oh, that is so cool.
well, what it is the cast from my broken wrist. I had a broken wrist in 2006. And I went to the Yogi Berra Museum, and Yogi Berra and Don Larson had a joint thing that evening. And I got them both to sign my cast. Can you see it?
I
Yeah.
can see that. That's
Is it
very
upside
cool.
down?
Yeah, now it's right.
Yeah.
Okay. And
It looks like Yogi
but-
signed it twice.
yeah, he did. And you know why? Because this first one, I looked at it and I said, I can't read that. And he looked at it and he said, you know, you're right. Let me do it again. And he did. Because it's not easy signing a cast. It's all,
Right.
you know, it's a hard surface. But anyway, that's my weirdest piece of memorabilia. So I feel a kinship with you that, yeah.
Most of the autographs I got are beautiful. They're legible. They're
Uh-huh.
readable. The most beautiful autograph I think that I got to go with Willie McCovey. I mean, also in part because he was my favorite player, but he just had a beautiful kind of flowing autograph.
Nice. That's
But
nice.
nowadays it's like you get these players and you can't read, you know, what they wrote. And I find that kind of disappointing and sad because, you know, there's still a connection between the fan there and the player, but it's like trying to read their autograph is just, it's hard.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that difficult.
Nice
Well-
handwriting is a dying art.
Sadly, it is.
Yeah.
Nobody does cursive anymore.
No.
Mars, did you have a question, Mars?
Yeah, I got Willie Mays' autograph from the Polo Grounds in 1955, which is clearly legible. But the autograph I got at the Moscone Center baseball card convention I can't tell what it is, you know. But my
Yeah.
biggest opportunity, and I didn't even think about it. My pop was on the 8th grade basketball team with Hank Greenberg, and he invited us into the National League clubhouse in 1984, and we were following Carl Hubble. So I never got Carl Hubble's autograph where I could have, and I didn't get Hank Greenberg's autograph and a whole lot of other notables. It just didn't even occur to me.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking, I think, you know, part of it, there are missed opportunities. And, you know, I remember I was in college and I signed up for the Jewish group in college, you know, because I was tired of eating in the cafeteria. And at one point I got an invitation to go to the rabbi's house to meet Elie Wiesel. And I'm like, I so regret not getting his book and not getting it signed. I'm like, God, how, you know, why did I not do that? You know, and that happens. I mean, you know, I remember when we were kids, Lincoln and his brother invited me to go to a Giant Dodger game on a Friday night, and I was tired and didn't want to go. And it turned out it was Jerry Royce's no-hitter. I'm like, which I'm kind of glad I missed anyway. But
My
you
brother
know,
didn't go either. I went alone to that one, Charles.
oh, you did? I thought, okay.
Yeah.
But you know, seeing the Giants get no hit by the Dodgers is not high on my list. So, but you know, I remember coming home from like school in like 7th grade, you know, in San Francisco, and you know, what's now my neighborhood again. And who do I see sitting there? But you know, getting ready to be filmed and whatever, was Leonard Nimoy. So I went and got Leonard Nimoy's autograph. I always believe in being polite. I always believe in saying please and thank you. It drives me nuts that kids don't say please and thank you anymore. That bugs the hell out of me. I also believe, why do you need, a bunch of, 9 or 18 autographs of the same player? That whole kind of eBay mentality of, getting a bunch of autographs of the same player and selling them just bothers me. At most I may get 1 autograph or 2 autographs of the player. It depends on kind of the project thing. And I'm actually now working on a 1980s Willie Mack Award winner ball. And I'm expecting to get it back from Larry Herndon, and I still need Mike Krukow and Bob Brenly. So am I going to do the 90s and am I going to do the 2000s? It's like, I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. So sadly, the only one missing will be Jose Uribe, who's already passed. So
Dave Lippman, you're up. Dave, unmute. Take your mute off.
I just wanted to share my own autograph efforts. I got my hands on a 1984 Giants yearbook, which those of you who have one will know that it contained little biographies and pictures of all the Giants to that point who had been all-stars. That was the year they hosted it.
Right.
And I mailed it separately to Jojo Moore and Harry Danning.
Wow.
And separately with a letter telling them my father and grandfather remembered them. They responded with very nice letter.
Politics.
And the one from Harry was interesting because he talked about how he had not had access to he was not in the pension plan for major league players till that time, but then he'd recently been able to get in it, so he was able to supplement his Social Security. It makes you realize how hard it was for ball players at that time. And I later got it signed by Bobby Thompson at an event, and Monty Irvin when he appeared at the Yogi Berra Museum. And Monty's brother was there, and he apparently played in the Negro Leagues. So he signed that section as well. And it would be nice to get some more of those guys in it, but I don't think a lot of those guys are. I think a lot of those guys are gone. I mean, most of those guys were from the 30s and 40s and 50s, and they're not with us. And obviously, you can't. Mays does not sign autographs anymore, which is a shame. So that's my little story.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. It'd be silly of me not to call on him, but Norm, could you tell us your story? Because a lot of people in here, we get a lot of new people. They may not know this incredible story. It's similar in a way to Charles, but very different.
Well, I do what you do, Charles. But my goal was to get all of the San Francisco Giant players. And I have them all through 2020, through last year. I'm still missing Gregory Santos and Sammy Long from this year. And I have all the managers and coaches except for Dustin Lind, who is really ticking me off because I have sent him 3 letters and received nothing back from him. So it's the same story. And that's why I really enjoyed listening to you talk, because I can relate to everything that you were saying, Charles. And I do have one question for you.
Sure.
And actually, I had more questions, but my questions were Skip James and Mike Rex, and you answered them when you started. But now my new question is on that Half Moon Bay golf tournament. That was the Bobby Bonds Classic. And it was Major League Alumni Association in conjunction with the Half Moon Bay Boys and Girls Club. It was a fundraiser they had every year. And at that barbecue, they had a quiz every year based on the players who were there. I was just curious if you remember, not the questions, but you remember the quiz even occurring?
I vaguely recall, because I think I went 2 different years, and I vaguely recall one year they had the quiz, and the next year I think they had like a drawing. And in the drawing, I got a Monty Irwin signed photograph.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Reason
So
why I asked.
sadly, the autograph has faded.
Charles, does the back of your jersey say boo or no?
No, it does say LeMaster.
Okay.
So, but the autograph sadly is faded, but I still have the picture. And I think it's a great picture. I don't recall if Monty was there and if he signed it there, but I remember getting a signed ball from Brooks Robinson.
Yeah, Brooks Robinson was there every year. Monty
Yeah.
Irvin was never there. The reason why I asked the question is I wrote those quizzes.
Oh, you did? I had no idea.
Norm,
Yes.
just one quick thing. So from 58 to now, you have every San Francisco Giant autograph. What is the total?
Well, except for every autograph, except for the 2 I mentioned.
Right,
and
right.
that's the thing.
But what are you, how many are there?
There are 991 players in SF Giants history as of today.
Wow.
John, you got another movie here. Speak to Norm, John. Harvey, you're up.
I don't have a collection of autographs, but I do have an autograph and a little comment by Bobby Thompson. I think I've said this before. Helen and I and our friends Billy and Kathy Murphy and a bunch of other people sat with Bobby at a dinner called the Staten Island Old Time Baseball Players Association in somewhere around early 1995. And I knew I was going to be at the table, and I wanted to get Bobby's autograph, but I thought of something a little different. I have this book. I'm going to try to hold it up. I don't know if you could see it.
Yeah, I know that book. I have that book.
Yeah, why is it showing up backwards on my screen? But in any event, is
It's
it
forwards on ours.
is it backwards on your screen?
No, we're good.
No.
Okay, that's good.
I
So
got that
the book says, the book is the Giants win the pennant. The Giants win the pennant. I love saying that. And it says the real story by Bobby Thompson, with a forward by Leo DeRocher, the afterword by Ralph Branca, and then the ghostwriters are Lee Hyman and Bill Gutman. So I bring the book to the dinner and I say, Bobby, I'd like you to autograph this book. And he had some funny comments. I said, well, you wrote the book, Bobby. He says, yeah, sure I did. You know. So, but what he wrote, and what got me to pull it off the shelf was when people were talking about beautiful handwriting. Bobby had beautiful handwriting.
He did.
And I'm going to hold this up and then I'll read it because I'm sure you won't be able to read it, but you can't. Let's see. There you go. And you can see his signature and what he wrote, and it's beautiful cursive writing to Harvey. That would be me. Been great tonight to meet a real giant. He called me a real giant. Not a Giant fan. He called me a real giant. It's been fun swapping old Giants tales with my best always, Bobby Thompson. So it was a little more than just Bobby Thompson. He wrote something out. Anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I met a few years ago. I met Fritz Peterson, and I was rumbling around the internet, and he's the player who he traded his wife. His wife got traded with another Yankee pitcher,
Mike Kekich.
Mike Kekich, and who unfortunately Kekich doesn't sign. And so I found some, $4 book off the internet about Fritz Peterson and Mike Kekich, and I was like, I had to buy it. He's going to be at the show, and so I bring it to him, and great inscription similar to that, but I'm not going to, I know that he's not doing so well, and I heard he has Alzheimer's, but I'm not going to say what the inscription was till after he passes. But it's a hysterically funny inscription.
Oh,
With
you
regards-
got you got to share a little bit with us. You could censor it.
Okay. It was something along the lines of "Thank you for taking my ex-wife. I'm glad to be rid of her."
Sounds like Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah, he was a character. He was, it was funny. It was like, and I so would love to get it signed by Mike Kekich. And, I know he was selling real estate in New Mexico, and I don't know what he's doing now. But I don't think Mike Kekich signs anymore. But I love the inscription.
Let's go to Hindi and then John.
Okay. By the way, thank you. I really enjoyed the talk.
Oh, thank you very
today.
much.
I really loved it. So my autograph from Bobby Thompson is from 2004, and it says, I'm going to show it to you first. Wait, it says, "To Hindi, a true giant. With my best wishes, Bobby Thompson, October 3rd, 1951. But this is why he was lovely. But this is my one regret. I have a lot of autographs from Cooperstown. I'm going to show it to you, and then I'm going to tell you why I regret it."
I know that picture. Yep.
I did not get Ralph Branca's autograph.
Oh.
Only Bobby Thompson. I said hello to him. He was nice, and I always regretted it. I felt very bad about it because they were doing it together. They were really pals. And
No, I have one where Thompson and Branca were together, and I got, I bought it through the mail and through the promoter, and there's Bobby Thompson and Ralph Branca in the home run. So
thanks, Indy. John, go ahead.
I have the same one.
Yeah, I'm not anywhere near the autograph hound Charles is, or any of you folks. I do want to share some of my Giants things, but one of the Giants autographs, but one of the most interesting ones I have is a ball signed by Don Larson a few years before he passed away. But in 2016, I got to knock something off the bucket list, and I went to the Giants fantasy camp in Arizona, and all of the Giants coaches, all of them, of course, former players, Vida Blue, Mike McCormick, Hackman Leonard, he was my coach, along with Scott Gereltz. So they all signed the ball, but one thing that was really nice was to be able to I spent about a half an hour talking to Mike McCormick by the pool, hotel pool one day, and he talked about coming to the Polo Grounds when he was first. I mean, he basically got drafted by the New York Giants not long after he got out of high school. And he said, I got there and, I didn't know anybody. And they said, "Hey, kid, go out to the field and warm up." And he said, some guy I didn't know, I was playing catch with him, and the ball was going all over the place, and he kept hitting me. I couldn't catch it. Turned out to be Hoyt Wilhelm.
oh,
But the other thing I'll wrap this was a ball that I got signed at the end of Giants fantasy camp, and at the end, and it's signed by Trevor Wilson. And the reason I had him sign it, the very last day of fantasy camp, the campers are allowed to have an at-bat against a former Giants pitcher. And I was in line with everybody else, and oh crud, I'm forgetting the guy's name who was up there pitching. He's one of the Giants broadcasters now. He's a color man, Sean Estes, and he's just carving guys up, not throwing nothing but breaking balls. It's like I have no chance against this guy. Fortunately, it's time for a new pitcher, and Trevor Wilson comes in, and I'm the first hitter to hit against him, and I was able to knock a hit off of him, so I got him to sign the ball. So that's one of my cherished Giants signed balls. And I will say this, when I look for films to make, I look for really unique stories. I spent many years working for the Walt Disney Company, and I learned from them, if you're going to sell a product, it had better be very unique. And so I heard Charles share this story at a Sabre meeting in the Bay Area. 35 years. This is a quest of quixotic proportions, and the gentleman who's gotten the Giants to sign every Giant to sign. I mean, that's pretty amazing. But 35 years, this particular quest, and he's slogging all over the country and sending this thing through the mail. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So And it was so much fun interviewing Charles. But I think the most fun in making the film, and I put in the chat box where you can see the film. And but we spent a few hours one morning gathering color footage of Charles out in front of the ballpark, and we went inside the stadium store to get some footage of him. We had so much fun doing that. I enjoy making all of my films, but I think that particular film was really fun because, you know, Charles, the nature of Charles's fandom is really special. And, you know, he's just all in. And I'm a big Giant. I mean, I thought I was a big Giants fan. I grew up in San Francisco with Willie Mays and all this kind of stuff. But he's in another galaxy in terms of his fandom. So when it came to telling, and really when you understand his personal story, that very challenging family life growing up, and the Giants and his friends like Lincoln and Lincoln's brother and the people that he met at Candlestick Park, they became his family. And now we're not talking about baseball. We're talking about humanity and friendship and what brings us joy in life. And that's why I think Charles' story is so rich and important.
Hey, John,
My mother used to ask me before I would go to games, and she'd be like, you know, and you know, sometimes Lincoln was not available or whatever, and she goes, "Well, are you going to the baseball game with any friends?" I said, "Yeah, 30 to 40,000 friends who I haven't met yet." And my mother would always kind of like, you know, shake her head and say, "God, he's weird," but you know, but she loved that baseball brought me joy. So,
John, I'm so glad you gave your little input there. Please know that you're always welcome on this if you want me to include you on our email list.
Please do.
Wonderful. Why don't we wrap it up with, if anybody has not asked the question, they can. If not, we're going to go to Mars. Mars, wrap it up.
Yeah, we're talking about autographs and things. One thing I wanted to mention, do you realize in another 12 years, the Giants will be playing in San Francisco for 75 years, which is the tenure of the New York Giants, you know, in that city. It's incredible that San Francisco is catching up to that in another dozen years. Another thing I wanted to mention was back in 1984, when we had the All-Star game here, and Carl Hubble struck out the 5 Hall of Famers, and then 2 pitchers in the National League. One of them, I think Dwight Gooden and Fernando Valenzuela struck out 5 in a row, but that they shouldn't even include that because Carl Hubble was the only pitcher that struck out 5 Hall of Famers. But when my pop had a really big surprise for me. My daughter was a year old, so my parents flew out to San Francisco to see their granddaughter. But I had tickets for the All-Star game. And my pop had a really huge surprise for me. He says, "Where's the National League clubhouse?" I said, "Well, that's the Giants clubhouse down right field." So he says, "Well, let's go down there." I go, "What? Why?" And he said, "Well, I got a surprise for you." So in the 8th grade, the school my father and Hank Greenberg went to won the New York City championship, and my father sank the winning overtime foul shot to win the game, and Hank Greenberg was the center and he was the guard. So they got this name in the New York Times. But anyway, we were following Carl Hubble, and this is where Harvey mentioned something about the arm. Well, going into that clubhouse, we're following this tall, thin man, and my pop said, "Look at his left arm," and it was contorted, completely contorted, where it was twisted around the other side. That to me blew my mind.
Charles,
before we go, do you want to go to Sunday's Giant Dodger game?
Do I?
No, me.
Oh, you.
You're Charles.
Yes.
I think I already have plans for that day. I'm sorry. I'm following it, but I got other things going on.
You can have my ticket if you want to go.
What?
Thank you.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. What do you mean you have other things going on? Superfan is not going to the most important series between the Giants and the Dodgers all season long. The man is offering you a ticket. There had better be a woman involved. That's all I have to say.
There is, and I have a sports card show down the peninsula. I have a prior commitment.
Oh, for God's sake.
Come on up and drive up, John. Take Tom's ticket.
I'm going to watch it from the comfort of my couch right down here in Los Angeles. I'm an Indian in the fort representing the Giants down here in Southern California.
Thank
By
you.
God, I'll be watching. None of this going to a bloody card show. Jay.
Charles, we cannot thank you enough. Give Charles.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Great story, and this was very entertaining, and everybody's in a good mood because the Giants won today. So
Yes.
We're
You
Giants.
bet.
Amen. Amen.
It's a little weird watching it on YouTube, but that's okay.
win is a win. Again, next week we'll have Linda Tassetti, Babe Ruth's granddaughter. John, I will add you to that list. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I will be here to close out the room. Have a great night, everybody.